The 2023 Pro Farmer Crop Tour is presented by Pioneer. Pioneer combines cutting-edge research with one of the largest local testing programs in the industry to help farmers succeed. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And by BASF, helping you do the biggest job on earth. The international sponsor for Crop Tour is the U.S. Soybean Export Council. Crop Tour 2023 is also supported by Ag Leader, by Brandt, by Champion Seed, by Farm Credit Services of America, by Growmark, by Meristem Crop Performance, by the Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, by Nutrien, by Pattern Ag, by RCIS, and by the United Soybean Board.
Hello and welcome once again to Crop Tour Live. I'm Clinton Griffiths and this is day 3 of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour with the focus today on some key Iowa states. Now the eastern leg of the tour starting in Bloomington, Illinois and ending in Iowa City today. While out in the west, scouts made their way from Nebraska City, Nebraska, and also into Iowa, ending there in Spencer. And now, after enjoying a meal and cooling off inside following a day of sweltering temperatures, scouts from both sides of the tour are in Iowa tonight, awaiting the latest corn and soybean average yield predictions. Those numbers coming up shortly. Right now, we want to bring in our tour leaders. Again, Brian Grady, the editor of Pro Farmer, in charge of the eastern leg, and out in the west, the host of AgriTalk, Chip Flory. Guys, give me a quick synopsis of what you saw today. Chip, we'll start with you there on the western leg of the tour in western Iowa.
All right, thanks, Clinton. Yeah, I saw a no meat sandwich today. Really good stuff in the south, good stuff in the north, but we were missing stuff in the middle of the western part of the state. It was like a donut hole there in west central Iowa. Not a lot of good to talk about there.
All right, Brian, on your side of the tour over in the eastern leg as you work through Illinois.
Yeah, so we saw about what we expected, I think, in some cases. Other cases, disappointing, talking to scouts, and so a little bit of everything, kind of good, bad, and somewhat some ugly. And so we'll see how it all turns out here.
All right, well, let's see how it turned out. And we will start with you, Brian, there in Illinois. Why don't you go ahead? It's the top of the hour here in just a couple of seconds. We'll go ahead and get the numbers from Illinois. We'll start with corn.
Absolutely, 193.72, up 1.6% from last year. So, you know, a solid uptick from last year, what we found on Crop Tour, but not earth-shattering by any means. And then on Illinois soybeans, 1270.61, up 1.7%. So similar increases year over year for both corn and soybeans out of the state of Illinois.
All right, let's flip it over to Chip. And Chip, you've got several districts to go through.
Yeah.
We don't get all of Iowa tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to show you are the results from Crop District 1, 4, and 7. That's Northwest, West Central, and Southwest crop districts in Iowa. That's the best we can do for tonight. The average yield on corn in Crop District 1, 182.58. That's up less than 1% from a year ago. When we flip over to Crop District 4 in Iowa, we're looking at 168.71. That's a 6.7% decline. A year ago, we were 180.8, and the 3-year average in Crop District 4, we're looking at 184.77. So a 168.7 is a big issue. A lot of the problem was with the grain length in Crop District 4. And then down in the southwest part of the state, Crop District 7, we are looking at a 184.8 bushels per acre. That is a 6.4% increase over a year ago. So we were basically steady in northwest Iowa, down 6.7% in west central, and up 6.4% in the southwest part of the state. Those numbers kind of wash out, don't they? It looks like we're moving some of the tougher conditions around, but the bottom line is the western part of the state is looking very similar to what it was a year ago.
Did soybeans follow the same pattern?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We had a 4.4% increase in the pods in Crop District 1 at 1137.2. In Crop District 4, we were down 11%, down 11% at 1120.3. And then we were down 4.4% in Crop District 7 on the pod counts at 1170.28. So it's, the Southwest beans didn't compare to a year ago like the corn did, but we're still seeing that drop off in the pods in the west central part of the state.
Super interesting. So as we start to talk this through and break this down a little bit, Brian, I'm sure you've got some questions for Chip there on the western side of the state there in Iowa. What stands out to you as you see those numbers come in? Is it really just, that we do see the divergence there in a couple of districts?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, so is it an offset, complete offset in terms of bushels that are moved around from one crop district to the other across that western portion of the state?
I don't know if it's going to be a complete offset because I think we've got a few more acres in the west central part of the state than we do in the southwest. So we got to be aware of that as we think about, is it an offset or not. But for the most part, I shouldn't say for the most part. Let's say in the big picture, yeah, I think we just moved bushels around from last year.
And what about this? We talk about Illinois there. Chip, anything stand out to you as we look at this Illinois crop and try to kind of decide? I mean, there's big expectations always for the crop in Illinois, and we know there have been some challenges there. Brian, do we see any variability from field to field?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was rather consistent, I think, from stop to stop, but there was variability within the field. Maturation variability within the years, sometimes on those 3 years that we pull. And so, it all goes back to the fact that it didn't pollinate real evenly. And as a result, you do see that variability within the fields.
What about on the soybean side of things, Brian? Any different story than corn?
So the soybeans, I think the maturation was greater today than what we saw the first 2 days, very similar to what we saw on the corn there. And I think it's a very similar situation, honestly, with the corn and soybeans in western Illinois in particular. The eastern side of the state, I think that there's a little bit more volatility and variability and stuff out there.
Chip, do these numbers surprise you at all when you go ahead and look at what's going on in Illinois from what you've been hearing?
I don't think so. Brian, isn't this what we've been expecting to hear out of Illinois?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
USDA had them down 6%, 6.1% year over year, but coming down from a record last year. We have it up 1.7% year over year, but we missed big last year. And Crop Tour,
Yes.
on years when Illinois has a corn yield above 200 bushel, we missed bigger. And that's probably because we don't get into that southern area, that southern third of the state. And as a result, that typically is a pull up in terms of when they have the really big yields in Illinois.
Yeah, that's a great
good point. Good
Yeah,
point.
absolutely. We talked about that. I feel like we talk about that almost every year, but it's a great point to make. Simply put, gentlemen, it was hot for Scouts as they made their way into Iowa today. But over in Illinois, they've had a summer where they've seen a little bit of everything. I mean, we're talking everything from hail to high winds, dryness, even a derecho. Scouts report dry weather in June took a bite out of the crop. But when that derecho came and hit at the end of June, the moisture from that seemed to be a little bit of a game changer, at least for some of the folks out there.
I think across the whole state of Illinois, it really propelled everything forward and probably saved some people from having failures.
We got several inches, 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 up in Will County, Illinois. Just a big stretch.
Some signs of sudden death syndrome, some Phytophthora out there showing up in different places in Illinois bean fields. A little bit of tar spot has been confirmed in 2 counties just this week. What about disease pressure out there as we're looking at these crops? Brian, did you see much of that while you were traveling the countryside?
Out there. I don't know if it's out there to the degree that it's going to have a huge yield impact on either corn or soybeans, but there's some stuff out there. And some years we come through and it's relatively clean. I would say that this year isn't the cleanest, but it's by far not the worst that we've seen either, I don't think.
Chip, what about in Iowa? Any disease
Yeah,
pressure?
you know, at this time of the year, what you want to see from a bean crop is a consistent color in that crop. You want dark green soybeans, and Western Iowa gives you great observation points because of all the hills. So you can look into those side hills, you can look down into valleys, and this is as multicolored a bean crop as I can remember in Western Iowa. We've seen every shade of green. We've seen shades of yellow, and some of that is natural maturity on the bean crop out here already. And unfortunately, we've seen some basically every shade of brown as well. There's white mold, and I think that goes back to the rains that came around the 4th of July, and then I think that's when that white mold set in, because right now it's not like you see a lot of active white mold in the field, but when you walk out into the fields, I saw several dead plants today. So it's already done its work, it's already done its damage, and it's and it's still active. I mean, a couple of samples that I pulled today, I could feel the slime on my hands from grabbing those plants down at ground level. So I think it's still happening out there. We just need to. I think it's going to look a lot different in a week than it does right now.
You know what? I think that's something that everyone's talking about, that this crop may look different in a week. Did we mention that it was hot today? How hot?
Yeah.
We'll take a look at these daytime highs today. Temperatures in Nebraska, into Iowa in the triple digits. Illinois mostly in the upper 90s. Tomorrow, a little bit of relief as the tour rolls toward Rochester, Minnesota, with temperatures there in the lower 90s. But in some places, days of heat already impacting the crop. And Chip, you mentioned this last night. Terry Christensen of Minden, Nebraska, in the south central part of the state, sharing this video today saying his dryland beans are done. He says a rain now will only delay the agony, adding that the dead areas are not mature enough to harvest, and that the somewhat green areas that you see here are shriveling. He doesn't think they're going to recover. When he took this video today, he said it was 94 degrees with a high of 103 expected. He says his dryland corn is falling apart too. Guys, I think that's the question, right? So are we measuring potential? Is this crop going to race towards maturity really quickly? What do you guys think?
Well, I think we measured potential the first 2 days in Ohio and Indiana, immature crops out there. And so it's more potential than actual yield in those two states. As we moved into Illinois today, you know, it's the crops were way more mature than what we saw the first 2 days. So I think it's kind of a tale of both sides out in the Eastern Corn Belt.
Yeah, in Nebraska, I feel like we measured mostly yield on corn, although we've not had to experience this kind of temperature and low humidity and breeze for several years out there. So I think the hybrids that we've got out in the field are going to handle it better than what it has in the past. But I don't know how the irrigated corn is going to stand up to this. The dryland corn is shutting down, like Terry said. And on those beans that he showed yesterday when I was in Nebraska, I said I felt like I was watching a bean crop die.
Yep.
I did not feel that way today in Western Iowa. The white mold is continuing to, it concerns me going forward. But as far as the moisture and the drought stress on the crop, I don't feel like we were watching a bean crop die because of drought. So over in Nebraska, that's exactly how I felt. It was kind of miserable.
Absolutely. Well, you know, despite the heat and some dryness, our tourist scouts report that Iowa seems to be doing, you know, pretty well this year following last season's issues. Rains have been spotty, obviously. There's concern about nighttime temperatures could impact some corn filling process there. Others are expecting average to above average yield in Western Iowa.
The heat of 100 degrees is nothing new for August for us. For how long the temps are holding on for 5 or 6 or 7 days in a row and not cooling down below 70 degrees at night is really going to hold the crop really hard finishing out.
I think maybe average to maybe slightly above in some areas. I think you'll have some areas that'll pull it back up. There's going to be some pretty good corn out there. There's going to be some pretty good beans out there. So corn might just be average. Beans should be actually a little above average, I would believe.
Now, soybeans also appear to be struggling with this late season heat, especially where it's dry. There's some optimism about the resilience here of this crop. I know, Brian, that you spent a little bit of time going through eastern Iowa. That's going to be very telling tomorrow. Give us a preview of what you expect to see tomorrow on your trip.
Well, it's going to be critical because I already talked to some scouts on what they saw coming through in eastern Iowa, and it isn't all a pretty picture, to be honest with you. The heat is really having an impact, and so we'll see tomorrow as we move up through and finish things out. You had the map up last night, and it showed up in northeast Iowa, some of the drier spots up there. So last year, northeast Iowa was absolutely phenomenal, and we may see a different picture tomorrow as we move forward and move up into Rochester.
Yeah, last year we called that the garden spot, right? I mean, everyone said,
absolutely.
It was like a greenhouse up there.
Yes, for most people it was, yes.
Yeah, and then Chip, obviously you're going to take a tour of southern Minnesota there, which typically is the better part of the state as far as the bigger yields go in Minnesota. What do you expect to see? Give us a little bit of a preview on your routes tomorrow.
I don't know if I can describe it as timely rain. They've been short on rain June, July, and August, but they had about many areas had about 2 inches of rain the early part of August. So I think that's probably going to have that bean crop looking okay. The corn crop I think will be okay as well. What I'd love to see is a corn crop in the late dough stage. Maybe very, very early dent stage, but I think this heat has probably been pushing it a little bit, and it's going to maybe bring the end of the growing season a little bit too soon for that corn crop to do everything that it can do. But I do think we're going to see a good corn crop. I really do.
All right. Brian, any parting words here as we make our way to the last day for our scouts to kind of wrap up this year's crop tour?
Yeah, so the final charge tomorrow, obviously, and we got into the heat finally today. We'll feel it again tomorrow, but the scouts are excited to go through eastern Iowa and see what the crops have in store for us.
All right, gentlemen, sure appreciate it. Well, the 2023 Pro Farmer Crop Tour isn't quite done yet. Tomorrow's that last day with scouts in the West starting in Spencer, Iowa. They'll be arriving in Rochester, Minnesota, as we said, not that far behind the eastern leg, traveling from Iowa City en route to meet up with the West there in Rochester, and that's where it all will end. We'll bring you complete results from Iowa and Minnesota tomorrow, so make sure to join us back here again tomorrow night for results from the fourth and final day of the tour at 8 o'clock Central Time. Now, Chip, Brian, we'll send it back to you. Thanks to everybody for watching tonight.
The 2023 Pro Farmer Crop Tour is presented by Pioneer. Pioneer combines cutting-edge research with one of the largest local testing programs in the industry to help farmers succeed. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And by BASF, helping you do the biggest job on earth. The international sponsor for Crop Tour is the U.S. Soybean Export Council. Crop Tour 2023 is also supported by Ag Leader, by Brandt, by Champion Seed, by Farm Credit Services of America, by Growmark, by Meristem Crop Performance, by the Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, by Nutrien, by Pattern Ag, by RCIS, and by the United Soybean Board.